recognition of higher states of consciousness is a recurring theme that is evident in all cultures throughout history. What is the basis of our conscious experience, the cycle of waking, dreaming, and sleeping? The simplest state of awareness is a self-referral state. It is a field of all possibilities. As the physicist Eddington said, the stuff of the world is mind stuff. The ancient Yoga Vasishta likewise teaches that this world appears material, but is ultimately pure consciousness. These profound insights infer that consciousness is all there is, and we are not in the world. The world is within us. Welcome to Simplest State, where we examine these understandings and explore the very nature of consciousness and self-realization. Welcome everyone to Simplest State. Our guest today is Bob Roth, and Bob Roth is the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation and is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Strength in Stillness, The Power of Transcendental Meditation. Bob has been a meditator and teacher of transcendental meditation for over 50 years. Bob, you are in great demand everywhere at all times, so I'd just like to express my heartfelt thanks to you for generously sharing this time with us. Thank you, and welcome to Simplest State.
Thank you, Ron, and it's my pleasure and honor to be joining you. Ron is a longtime, very dear friend, so I have a philosophy, WRW, whatever Ron wants. So here I am.
Very kind. Thank you, Bob. Let's start at the beginning, because your path to meditation began back in the 1960s. So I'd like to start by asking you, what is it that drew you to meditation, and how has your understanding of spirituality evolved over the years?
Well, I'm told that there's an ancient meditation aphorism or saying, what brings a person to meditation? And there's two different yogas. They say there's the yoga of enlightenment, and then there's the yoga of desperation. So the yoga of enlightenment is a person says, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling good, I'd like to meditate because I would like to feel better, but I'm feeling really good, I just would like to do it to feel better. Yoga of desperation says, and it doesn't have to be like desperate. The yoga of desperation says, my life is not particularly fulfilling. I'm doing well. In my case, I was at a good university. I had a good family. I had things going well for me. And yet inside, there was something missing. And that something missing was a deep longing for something. I wasn't sure what it was, but nothing on the outside was satisfying me. So I heard about, when I first heard about transcendental meditation back in 1969, it really wasn't even a word in my vocabulary. I was working with a friend, and there was something about him that I really, really admired and respected and appreciated. There was something very good about him. He was solid, he was clear, he was kind, he was sort of, it's something that there's something I resonated with him. I liked to be around him. And I heard he was doing transcendental meditation at the time, and it was not a word in my vocabulary. So I told him, I don't believe in that stuff. And then he had a pen in his hand, and he dropped the pen into the other hand. He said, you don't have to believe in gravity for gravity to work. You don't have to believe in meditation writ large for meditation to work. So I said, well, I didn't want to join something weird, but I said, I'll give it 5 minutes. I'll go and learn it. And I learned to meditate, and it opened the door. It opened something inside of me, Ron, that I had never experienced before. And my understanding of spirituality has evolved tremendously. I didn't even have a definition of spirituality. There was religion and there was life. And I was just a sort of a dumb kid. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1960s. I, did what every kid does, played sports in high school and all that. And then in the late 60s, things started to change. There was sort of a political awakening, and I started working for Senator Bobby Kennedy Sr. for his presidential campaign because I wanted to change the world. And then I thought, okay, when I go to university, I'm going to become a lawyer and become a United States Senator, because I thought that was my path for purpose, meaning. I was always looking for meaning or purpose. And it took me about a month at the University of California at Berkeley in 1968 to realize that politics wasn't necessarily going to heal the soul of the nation. It was so much compromise. Politics is important, but for my path, my dharma, politics was not going to do it for me. And so then I ran across this fellow, Peter Stevens, that I just told you about. And I had a glimpse, a peep into something inside, which has been the goal of meditation writ large forever. And that was the first glimpse into what spirituality can be. Spirituality meaning a quality of life, a quality of interior of life that had nothing to do with superficial belief or principles or dogma or anything like that. It was an interior of life. So, and that has only grown. That little peep of light, little glimmer of light in a dark cavern of my interior has grown to become more and more effulgent. So I define spirituality as an interior experience of an interior of life that transcends, goes beyond surface structures.
Is that the stillness that you refer to in the title of your book,
Yeah,
Strength in
yes.
Stillness? Or
Yes.
how would you define stillness in that context?
Well, stillness, and before I would think just stillness is somehow being able to keep my type A 18-year-old body at the time, not moving, not jittery, not jumping around, not wanting to go out and play sports or do stuff. And that stillness comes, I use the analogy of an ocean where you have the choppy waves on the surface, and then but there's a vertical dimension to the ocean, and the ocean is pretty darn silent at its depth. So using that analogy for the mind, the surface of the mind is all the thoughts and feelings and moods and gotta. But then I learned from meditation that there is a vertical dimension to the mind, that there's something deep within, a level of silence or stillness that I did not know existed, but now has become my friend. And I say that sometimes to people. I say the internal, quieter level of the mind, and they go, "What are you talking about? What's a quieter level of the mind?" And I say, "You have a good intuition?" And they say, "I think so." Someone comes up to you, they have a thought, you could meet somebody, you could get a job, you could do some investing if you're trying to figure out what to do with your finances for your family, and it makes perfectly good sense, the explanation, the rationale for doing that, and you think, "I'm going to do that," and then you go home and you think about it quietly afterwards and you go, "I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to do that." And the person says, "How come?" And you said, "It doesn't feel right." That feeling doesn't feel, I think we've all had that. It doesn't feel right.
Sure.
That's a quieter level of the mind. And the hypothesis is even deeper than that. There's a level where your mind is already still and quiet and settled and wide awake. And that has been the aspiration and the goal of meditation throughout time, that experience.
In your book, you speak a lot about the effects of meditation on stress. So how does meditation help individuals cope with the growing stress in our society?
Key word you said there, Ron, is growing. So stress is just a fact of life. Stress is, they say, there's two aspects to stress. There's stressors. Stressors are demands, challenges. I mean, COVID was a stressor. If you have one of your kids is sick and you have to be someplace, that's a stressor. If you have some transition in a relationship or a job or something, those are external stressors. The other side component that produces stress is stress response. How do I react to those stressors? And when the stressor is bigger, more overwhelming than my ability to respond to it, then that creates stress. I mean, if I get up and I've meditated and I slept well and I'm eating right, and then, and I exercise and something happens to me, I get a snarky message on my phone, text message from a supposed friend, And if I'm on top of my game, I think, well, he's, obviously having a bad day, or she's having a tough time. But if I'm tired and worn down and overwhelmed, and those same text message comes across, and I need a little tender loving care, TLC, and I read that, so it's the same text message, it's how I respond. So stress is the product of when the stressor is bigger than my ability to respond. So, but that's a fact of life. Stress is a fact of life. The problem is when we add the word in front of stress, chronic stress. Chronic stress is when that stress, that reaction in my body doesn't dissolve itself after I've had a good night's sleep, or I've exercised, or I've done the best I can. That residue of stress builds and builds and builds and builds. And that residue keeps building, according to modern science, up to, and this is not a typo, up to 90% of all illnesses, mental and physical, has at its basis chronic stress. So I'm about to answer your question. So what's the best antidote to stress? Well, exercise is an important antidote. Eating well is an important antidote. Having good close friends is an important antidote. Sleeping well at night is a good antidote. But the best antidote, the most profound antidote, and sleep does a little bit of it, is deep, 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 deep rest. Deeper than sleep. That's what scientists have given that a term. They actually call it, funnily enough, deep rest state. They've suddenly discovered there's a deep rest state. And many meditation practices provide that. So by giving the body this profound rest for a few minutes during the day, the knots of stress, those imbalances, the twists and turns that come from the residue of stress, chronic stress, have a chance to be dissolved. Just like happens when you sleep and dream, there's a process of dissolving stress, but sleep is not deep enough. And during meditation practice, when your meditation practice gives you that deep rest, then deeply rooted stress is even deeper than that sleep can get rid of, are dissolved. And we find that working with veterans who have PTSD. They can't sleep at all for months on end, 1 hour a night, and they learn to meditate, and now within a few days, that stress has come out, and now they're sleeping 8-10 hours a night. So that's how deep rest that comes from meditation has that impact.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And there's a kernel in that right at the beginning of your answer that really struck me, and that is that we think of stress as something external, something imposed upon us, but really, more than anything, it's the reaction to that external stimuli that is the stress.
100%. It's 100%. When the demand is greater than my ability to deal with it,
right,
then it causes stress. And that stress affects us, first, it affects us in many ways, but 3 distinct ways. There's a muscular reaction to that, where my muscles tighten up, my jaws tighten up, I could get a tension headache, my shoulder knots up, my stomach knots up, my back knots up, my blood vessels constrict. So on one hand, there's a muscular reaction of tension to stress. At the same time, there's a chemical reaction to stress, a hormonal reaction to stress. My body creates something called cortisol, produces cortisol, and that makes me feel anxious. So now I've got that tension in my body. At the same time, there's anxiety, edginess in my system that makes me feel unsettled. And then that's chemical or hormonal. And then the third is electrical. And that is the connections of different parts of my brain. Everything good about the brain depends upon its connection, its communication. And stress breaks down communication. So now I'm not thinking as clearly, I can't remember things, I'm overreacting to things, I misread situations. So those 3 things, muscular, chemical or hormonal, and electrical, all are manifestations of stress.
Now, in the context of working with the David Lynch Foundation, you've worked with a lot of at-risk youth and veterans, and a moment ago you mentioned PTSD and how it had helped them. So Can you elaborate a little bit on the specific types of benefits that meditation and the development of consciousness specifically has helped these groups and what kind of experiences they've had?
Well, it's a wonderful question, because one of the horrible side effects of the buildup of stress, of this chronic stress, is the inability to sleep. Your system is so agitated that you can't sleep. And they say that 40 to 50% of all the symptoms, terrible stuff that come from PTSD, is simply the fact that a person hadn't slept for weeks or months. And so again, ability to fall asleep is very, very difficult for people when you have that underlying agitation. You can't sleep. But transcendental meditation and other meditations that give the body this deep rest can give the body deep rest at will. So you're not like, oh, I hope I sleep tonight. I hope, please, body, take me to sleep so I can feel better in the morning. We're hardwired for this deep rest state. And so on one level, one of the first things that happens is when a person learns to meditate is this insomnia becomes more in the rear view mirror. Another thing that happens, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is in the center of your brain, in what's called the limbic system. That's the emotional center. And your amygdala is like a fire alarm or a siren on the police car or something. And it goes off when we feel threatened. And now, if the amygdala was great in ancient times, when you'd be walking along somewhere in some jungle or something, and then all of a sudden you're being chased by a tiger. Well, you want the amygdala to go, holy moly. I don't know if it says holy moly, but holy moly. And then you get the fight or flight response, and then all the energy and the blood flow that have been going out to your hands and everything all goes to your muscles, and then you can run and you can fight. The problem is in modern day that fight or flight response, the amygdala is just going on all the time. The siren doesn't stop. The alarm doesn't stop. So people are now in fight or flight mode all the time when they have PTSD. And if you've been in combat and you hear a car backfire, and you're back in combat, and it's a bomb going off. So your body reacts to everything, overreacts to everything inappropriately because you're not there. So they say your amygdala takes over your brain. Again, what meditation does is it just calms the amygdala. It calms down this what's called the fight or flight response, or the sympathetic nervous system. And there's another part of your nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's your nervous system when you're at rest, sort of neutral, idling, and that gets activated. So, I mean, there's many, many more indications, but those two or three do a very good job. The change, some approaches to PTSD are, there's something called prolonged exposure, and it's just a horror. So you've come back from combat, and you're the only person who survived a bomb going off in a tank, and your buddies have all died, and you're just gripped by nightmares and everything. Prolonged exposure is, okay, let's show you pictures of bombs going off in tanks. Let's show you over and over and over again experiences of what you were wanting to block out in your mind. So they show it to you so many times it makes you numb to that memory. Well, hopefully maybe it makes you numb. The people who participate in this prolonged exposure hate it. And so nobody wants to finish it. So again, what is happening with meditation is it's giving the body this unique state of restful alertness that allows the body to heal itself. And that's a great, grand thing.
And there's very significant, especially to individuals who are suffering the consequences of PTSD. These are, on the other hand, what I would call side benefits towards the development of consciousness and the practice of meditation. The practice of meditation and the pursuit of spiritual development has a higher goal to it, and that is the expansion of consciousness and enlightenment. And have there been any pivotal experiences that you've had either with the people you've taught and worked with or in your own life that enhanced your understanding of the growth of spirituality and the development of consciousness?
Yes, and I would like to speak about that, but before I even do that, something that's fascinating to me is I remember when I started meditating back in 50 plus years ago, if you talked about higher states of consciousness or unbounded awareness, it was just crazy town. Nobody wanted to hear about it. It was uncomfortable. Scientists just thought it's just nonsense. Because at that time, you had sort of Freudian psychology, or you had the whole folk, there's 400 mental diseases that science has identified. And so the whole focus was on that. And when you start tracing, you mind if we talk about that for a little bit? You start tracing the arc of modern psychology is moving now more and more in the direction of just what you're talking about. How creative can we be? How happy can we be? How enlightened can we be? How compassionate can we be? How fulfilled can we be? And that's a direction called positive psychology. So positive psychology came around. I'm a very sort of down-to-earth, practical guy. And so for me, the development of I like to say enlightenment or higher states of consciousness is not something it's not something outside of the human experience. It is the best of the human experience. It's not something otherworldly. It's very much this worldly, but it's the best of this world. So for me, higher states of consciousness would be those times when my sense of compassion or appreciation for others or the world around me is not dimmed by something someone said to me, my buttons aren't being pushed, triggered, that I feel a great expansion of love. The Greek word is agape. Agape is sort of a universal love that extends beyond love for another individual. The Greeks had these 8 different words for love. Eros, which is sort of passionate love, and there's family love, but the one that is sort of a divine love or a cosmic love is called agape. And that is the most natural state. That is, you sort of don't understand why you're not living that way all the time. It's so sublime. And so for me, those moments of that kind of universal love, I remember those and cherish those and cultivating those experiences every day when I meditate and when I do my life running the foundation. So for me, that expansion is in the area of love. As far as awareness goes, I think it's a sense of connection or connectivity to others, not feeling foreign, not feeling other than. There's this whole epidemic of loneliness in the world today, and more young people feel this great loneliness, and I think it's because they're disconnected with their innermost self. So that for me, those experiences of connection and sort of even not just appreciation for the environment, not just appreciating other people, but actually feeling at one with other people. That's a big difference. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you are getting to know them and you sort of get to know them, and then your appreciation is deepening and deepening, and then you really, really appreciate them. You said, I really love that person. And then something rare happens in certain times when that love transcends itself, and you say, I just feel like we're one. It's a different thing than appreciating the finest value of that other person. I just feel like we're one. And that feeling of unity is also another human, highest level of human connectivity. So for me, I think my most profound experiences would be that experiences of a universal love, which is just an appreciation for everyone and everything, and that becomes on the basis of that unity. I find, interestingly, that the process of developing these higher states, so-called higher states, doesn't happen, okay, I'm going to meditate now for 5 years, and now suddenly these things start to happen. From the first meditation, these qualities are waking up in us. They're developing and the regularity of the practice, that whatever practice you have, if it's twice a day or whatever it is, the regularity of the practice establishes neural pathways in the brain for that connectivity, those neural pathways or connections in the brain that allows that feelings of love, the stress being released so your heart is not blocked. So right from the beginning, meditation starts developing this. And there's 3 main stages that happen, not just in a sequence, but not do one for 2 years and another for 2 years and another for 2 years. The first is sort of self-realization. At the temple of Apollo in Delphi, the oracle there says, know thyself. So that's the first step in anything, know thyself. And then the other instruction is be true to yourself. But so know thyself is sort of self-realization. Now, as I know myself more and more, as I'm more and more comfortable in myself, that's called you can look that up, cosmic consciousness. Pearl S. Buck wrote a book called Cosmic Consciousness. There's a lot of talk about, that's the self. I know myself. So right from the beginning, as meditation allows me to know myself, what happens next? Right away, I start to feel more connected to the environment. I feel more, I can appreciate the people I'm living with. I can love more the people I'm living with. I can appreciate my job, which there's the bad parts of my job used to overwhelm, or the bad parts of a relationship used to dominate. But now I'm seeing the beauty in what I have. I'm seeing the value in what I have. So that development of the other, the refinement of perception, has 2 different words. People of a religious bent can call it God consciousness. I like to call it refined cosmic consciousness. It's like an appreciation of the other. And then, as I said, and then they're growing unity. So this whole thing starts from the beginning. It's not like after 100 years or 10 years or something. This growth of self-realization, appreciation of the other, and then unity with all things. That to me is the sequence. And I see that happening when I talk, you said PTSD, but actually, at least in the United States, trauma is becoming more and more commonplace. People in business carrying, CEOs of companies or CEO of a family, financial concerns, that weighs on us day after day, and people start having symptoms of PTSD even when they're not living in a under served community or in combat. Just life itself is enough combat. But I start seeing that right away, feeling more comfortable in my own skin. I'm getting along better with others, and I don't have a loneliness. I feel comfortable in myself and with others, that unity.
That's a wonderful point. And I think what I really like about what you just said is it underlines the normalcy of the development of consciousness. It takes it out of that realm of mysticism and something so unattainable, and you must go and live the life of a recluse in a cave for 50 years. Whereas in fact, what it is really is the full development of human potential that is everybody's birthright and is attainable by everyone.
Yes, and the regularity of practice, whatever we're doing for meditation, the regularity of practice is not just to make us feel guilty when we're not doing it, but the regularity of practice. I used the term neural pathways before. And neural pathways are, so you have if you're learning to play piano, and so you're practicing playing piano, and I move my fingers like this, and when I move my fingers like this, then it creates the neurons or brain cells that make me move my fingers like this. They fire together. And when I keep doing that, they say brain cells or neurons that fire together while I'm practicing piano wire together afterwards. So that's why I can come back the next day and not have forgotten everything. And they describe neural pathways as there's a big field in your back somewhere, big field with high grass. and you walk through the grass, and the first time you walk through the grass, you have to push everything away, and then coming back. But you keep walking through the grass, to and fro, to and fro. Pretty soon that path becomes padded down, and now you can just move unimpeded. And so that's what happens, for example, when you're learning to play the piano. You're trying to get there, and then all of a sudden, it's second nature. You don't even have to think. Those connections. Well, the same connections, or learning to ride a bicycle. So the same connections are there for meditation. And you do that regularly, and then the whole process of meditation becomes effortless, second nature. And then not only is it second nature, but those connections remain in the midst of all of your dynamic activity. So that inner stillness, that inner equanimity that comes in your meditation practice remains after your meditation practice.
The brain cells that fire together wire together.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
When we speak about this, the development of potential and how this evolves, it reminds me a little bit more from a Western perspective of Abraham Maslow and his concept of people becoming their very best, maximizing their potential in what he calls self-actualization. Have you encountered that or given much thought to it? Or
Sure. Well, I'll give you a little background on that. So Maslow came out in 1954, and he said, psychiatry and psychology is just too negative. It's just too focused on the problems and the diseases and this limitation. It's just like, and he said, no, we want to, they call it positive psychology. He's the founder of positive psychology. He said, that thing I said before, how creative can we be? How healthy can we be? How happy can we be? And so he came up with what he called his hierarchy of needs in order to get there. And he said there was 5 levels. He said, well, the first need is, your physiology. You have to be alive, and you have to have food and water. So you have to sustain yourself. That's the first level. And once you have that, the second level, he said, was safety and security. All right. So you can't be, all right, I'm breathing and I'm alive, but if I'm constantly afraid for myself, then I have to have that. And once I've got that, the third level, he said, is, okay, now I'm feeling safe. I got a home. It's safe. Then he said the next need that we feel is the need for love and to belong to something. So that's like family. And then he said the next level was your own esteem, self-esteem. You need to feel good about yourself. You could have a family, but if you don't feel good about yourself, you can't really appreciate anything. And then his fifth was, as you were saying, self-actualization. It's a common human desire to whatever I can be, to be it. So if I'm a cellist, I want to be the best cellist. If I'm a mother or a father, I want to be the best father. If I'm a doctor, so that's like self-actualization. You feel good about yourself. Now, he said, self-actualization, he said, when a person can do what they feel they're meant to do and meant to be. But here's the interesting thing. At the end of Maslow's life, he said, well, actually, I haven't been telling everybody this. I also came up with a 6th stage. And he said, and he called it Transcendence. Those were his words. And he recognized that there's something far greater than just a relative actualization of my individual potential. He said, you have to feel part of something bigger, because you are part of something bigger. You're not just this little cog. The reality is you're part of something bigger. And he said that transcendence is it's an expansion we're talking about. It's like more of that enlightened sense of that bigness. So it was, and a lot of people, when you look it up, they don't even know what he meant. They just almost ignore it. Well, it was self-actualization, but I'm not sure what transcendence is. Yet he said it was the single most important level that you needed to attain, which is to be part of something bigger.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when you were speaking earlier about Delphi, the temple there, and know thyself, I think one point that we should clarify is know thyself doesn't mean know me, my individuality, what are my habits, what are my likes, what are my desires, what are my fears. It means know that level of transcendence, know that pure consciousness that underlies, that is the very basis of our individuality.
Your universal self.
Your universal self,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
That's the key, to know that.
Know that. And then, what does it say in the Bible? And love thy neighbor as thyself. It's not like you just got to, look out for myself and I'm a pretty good guy. And no, love thy neighbor. So you have to, and that's that unity. You know myself, that infinite, unbounded consciousness, the reality of existence beyond that. And now I love you as that. It's not an individual relative love. It's a universal love.
And not making a mood of, oh, I love you,
No,
but because I recognize myself in you as well.
Exactly. Beautifully put.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, there are, as you know, many different practices of meditation, many types of yoga, many different paths, we could call them, for the development of consciousness and reaching higher states of consciousness. What do you see as the similarities, the underlying principles that unify all these different practices?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I am not a believer of this only. This is the only thing I need to do. When people say, well, I do mindfulness, I don't need to do this, or I do loving kindness and I don't need to do. I think it's a yes and. I think we want to find, I'm a science guy, so I like to say evidence-based tools that actually, time is precious. I want to spend my time doing something that actually influences my mind, my brain, my body, my heart, all my spirituality, and that it's not just a mood-making sort of thing. So I'm a big advocate for integrating approaches that are proven to work. And because I think it's a big world out there, and it's tough for a lot of us. There's the challenges and the uncertainty. Our brain hates uncertainty, just hates it, because our brain evolved over time to keep us alive. And when we're not sure what's lurking around the corner, it makes us crazy. So with all this going on, we need tools to establish that equanimity inside, to access that steadiness that's within us. So I believe that there are different approaches. There are cognitive approaches to meditation. Cognitive means pertaining to your thoughts and your moods, and how do I deal with this situation? How do I live in the moment rather than worrying about the past? How can I just be present, mindfully present? And how can I, in daily life, be able to focus my attention? And then there's also accessing that silence that's within us. And I think that all those approaches integrate beautifully together, and that you actually want to have access to those three different approaches. For example, I teach kids to meditate, and they feel calm, and now they feel better. If some kid was very anxious, and the meditation helps them access that quietness within. And then they go to school, and there's a test, and he's a very sensitive child, and the poor child gets so nervous, is like hyperventilating before the test. Meditation helps, but this is a big thing. Well, there's some wonderful little simple breathing exercises that child could do. No one has to know they're doing it. He or she is doing it. Breathe in through the nose, hold it, breathe out through the mouth, hold it. Just that is a glorious adjunct. So my feeling is they work well together. And the similarity is the goal, and that is to not let the demands and challenges, the stressors, ever overwhelm my ability to handle those stresses. I want to develop this so that I'm really resilient inside, really strong inside, capable inside, and that's a neurophysiological thing. And whatever I'm doing. So if it's in the silence of meditation, if it's in a breathing exercise, if it's in some particular philosophy of life, great. Try that.
I think that's a great point. I mean, you might as well add as many engines to the boat as you can.
Yes.
I mean, do your meditation, do your physical hatha yoga practice, have a good diet, get enough rest, do anything that will improve your overall quality.
And there's some simple breathing exercise that you can do. Why not? With these breathing exercises, calm what's called the vagus nerve. Here I go in the science, but the vagus nerve is what's called the 10th cranial nerve. Starts in obviously the brainstem and then goes all the way through the body, and it connects together your lungs, respiration, your heart, your digestion, some facial muscles, but those three in particular. And when one thing happens to that vagus nerve, it gets thrown off slightly from stress, then that's why at one fell swoop, I'm breathing, I'm nervous, I'm breathing, my heart goes fast, I can't digest food. That's because of the one key thing is because of the vagus nerve. Now, vagus nerve responds beautifully to a breathing, simple breathing. It just calms the vagus nerve. Now, I find my experience with breathing is it doesn't have the long-lasting effects that meditation does, but in that moment, I mean, it can for some people, but in that moment, it's a very valuable tool to have.
And that's why pranayama, the breathing exercise, even though it feels very simple and not much to it, but it does have a profound effect, and it's an important addition to one's daily practice.
Yep.
So, I mean, speaking of the importance of these factors that you've just raised in school kids, what role do you see meditation having in education today? Because it would seem that the earlier someone can learn this in the life, the better off they're going to be, and they're going to have a more enjoyable, healthier, fuller life.
From 4 or 5 years old, there are meditation practices one can do that help to promote resilience. Children at a very early age are suffering from high levels of stress and anxiety and suicidality and all these things. You don't even like to think about it, but there's high levels. Just to be brutal here, the number 2 cause of death among teenagers is suicide. So that's a 13-year-old kid.
Wow.
That anxiety doesn't start at 13. It's building at a young age. So to equip that, we want our children to eat properly. We want our children to get enough, not just be on the devices all day long. We say, you've got to go outside, you've got to exercise, particularly as schools these days are cutting back on physical education. So we tell them they need to exercise. We tell them they need to be on a good routine and go to bed on time. Well, we want them to have the tools to calm the amygdala at an early age. Another time I can tell you a little bit about some of the interesting new research on the creative process in the brain. So I think that starting at a very early, from 5 years old, and then maybe around 10 or 11, they can do a more advanced adult level meditation technique to give them the resilience and the creativity and the curiosity and the excitement to learn. William Butler Yeats said, education is not about filling a bucket. He said, it's about lighting a fire. And so, yes, meditation at an early age should be part of, and I do feel within the next few years, it's going to be the norm. It's going to be the norm because nothing else is scalable, sustainable. Right now, we're going to give every kid Ambien because they can't sleep, and Adderall because they're hyper, and that's no way to raise a whole generation. Why not give them simple tools that they can do to harness the infinite creative potential of the brain and handle all the challenges that they're going to face, particularly now with AI coming. It's a whole new universe, and it's going to take optimizing a person's brain and nervous system and human potential to navigate those days.
Going one step further on that. I mean, you've done a tremendous amount of laudable work with first responders, with fire departments and police. Words like meditation, transcendence, enlightenment, they have a certain heaviness to them. And you're working with people who are extremely practical, down-to-earth people, people who face danger and life and death situations on an almost daily basis. And I'm wondering, in what sense do you present this type of knowledge of development of consciousness to them, and how is it received?
Well, I think you'd be surprised. It's sort of a generational thing. When I learned in the 60s, my parents' generation thought, are you out of your ever-loving mind? And then our generation, my generation, I don't know how young you are, but my generation, it was like meditation, okay, good, we learned it. It was a little bit out there, but not as much. Now with so much research and young people, they've heard about it online, in the media, in popular culture. She's a meditator, he's a meditator. So young people are not, it's not a word that offends or alienates or disconnects. And you'd be amazed. I mean, we work with fire departments in the most conservative areas of Colorado where everybody wanted to learn. And even here I'm in New York City, and I gave a talk to all these CEOs of big companies. And they've been hearing about meditation for a long time, not really knowing how to go about learning, and knowing that they got to get something, they got to do something. And so when you present it to them with the science, I use all the terms, development of consciousness, all those terms, but I say these are real. This isn't just this is not a mood making thing. This is real, and here's the science behind it. Like even breathing. People go, oh, this is strange, but then you explain about the vagus nerve, or you explain about the amygdala, and it calms the amygdala. And isn't it amazing you can do this one simple little thing, your breath could have such a profound effect on helping to calm something in a way that they could take these potent medications that help some people, doesn't help a lot of people, that can have these horrible side effects. So I think I just lead with the benefits and the research, and also show videos of other firefighters or other police officers or veterans or school teachers or doctors who are professional athletes who meditate.
And given that we do face a lot of unprecedented challenges right now on a global level, and as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people do feel quite overwhelmed with stress and anxious. You don't have to be a veteran to feel some sort of PTSD.
No.
So how would you recommend, having written the book, how would you recommend that individuals cope with or deal with that stress? What's the most effective way of handling the chaos that we see in the global situation?
It's because I do research on this, it's so funny. You look up, it's the same message. A person has bipolar disorder, a person had a heart attack, a person has gastrointestinal problem, a person is anxious, they're depressed, they're this, they're that. They say, okay, take your medication, all that stuff, over and over again. What the simplest things we need to do to let our body harness its full potential, and that is sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. Eat food that your body actually wants to digest, that it will get stronger. You wouldn't give your baby just awful food. You feed your baby foods, that milk and the whole thing that's healthy for them. We should do the same with our body. Exercise, it turns out even with exercise, I was reading something now, this whole idea of 10,000 steps a day, it's rubbish. It's not true. It was part of a marketing campaign in the 60s by a Japanese company that made pedometers. And I saw an article was published that said 15 minutes of walking 3 times a week really helps enormously. And then meditation, stress management, that whole thing. Simple things. And I don't think you can just do one and not the others. I don't think if you just meditated but stayed up late and ate junky food and whatever, that's going to do it. I think you say, what is it my body needs? I need to go to bed on time. I need to give it the sleep it needs. I need to give it the food it thrives on. I need to do some movement, exercise. And another thing is friends, support, the social safety network, and meditation. I think that's the key to everything. And I personally think meditation is foundational to all of that, because in meditation, you let those neural pathways of a healthier, integrated, stronger, more resilient mind, you can make the decisions of what am I going to eat and when am I going to go to bed, those choices that are important for living a healthy life.
What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions about meditation and about people who meditate and people who pursue that path?
Well, the misconceptions is still out there. I live in a bit of a bubble because I'm in New York City. I'm on the coast. And probably if I was in somewhere in the Midwest, in a small town in the Midwest, that misconception would be stronger, although it is evaporating, because sometimes their family physician tells them, you got high blood pressure, you need to do some meditation. And maybe they'll use an app, maybe they'll use a Headspace or a Calm or something like that gives them some temporary relief. But I think the misunderstandings is that it's difficult to do. And there are some meditations that are difficult to do, but there's also meditations that are easy, that are effortless. So if one is difficult for you, don't give up, try something else. And I think that's one thing. I think the sense that you might have to buy into some, well, I'm a Christian, or I'm Jewish, or I'm Muslim, or I'm Buddhist or Hindu, and that's going to be opposed to my religious belief, that's just a misunderstanding. That's a holdover from decades and decades, or hundreds of years ago, when meditation was packaged as part of religion. But now we've taken out the active ingredient. No, actually, we haven't taken it out. It was never part of it. It would be as if a person does jumping jacks. Okay, then they go to a religious school and they're doing jumping jacks. Well, it doesn't mean that the jumping, this thing, jumping jack. It doesn't mean that jumping jacks is that Jewish thing or Christian thing. It's an exercise. It's just jumping jacks. And I think same with meditation. Meditation has nothing to do with religion. It can help fulfill a person's religion by giving them the calm and the clarity and the deep connections with themselves, so that they understand and appreciate their religion more. But it's got nothing to do with religion. So I would say it's difficult, doesn't have to be. It's not a religious practice.
And assuming that the goal of religion is to create a better person, a moral, ethical person who's fully realized their full potential, we could say meditation really brings fulfillment to any religion.
That's right. Or non-religion. Or if they're not religious.
Or for non-religion,
then
right. Just to human life in general.
Human life.
That's right. That's right. How exactly does meditation develop our creativity and our productivity? What is the mechanics of how that effect takes place?
I love the whole thing about the brain and problem solving and the creative process. And so this is going to be a little bit of a deep dive, and not too bad, onto the brain. But
Go for it.
Fascinating. So for the longest time, you've probably heard this, we grew up with it, we were taught that there's two hemispheres to the brain, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere was always known to be the artist, as if a person was mainly a right hemisphere person, they were an artist, they were a musician, they were very intuitive, spatial, that sort of thing. Or they're a left hemisphere person, and a left hemisphere person, dominant, meant that they were like, if this was the artist, the right, then the left, this was the scientist, the mathematician, the numbers cruncher, the rational thinker. This was the intuitive thinker. And so the creative person was the person, the right hemisphere, their creative person. Turns out none of that's true. It's not true. The creative process is based on connections within different parts of the brain called networks. So networks is, again, it's all, everything good about the brain depends upon its communication, just like everything good about a relationship depends upon communication, or a family, or a business, or a world is communication. So everything good about the brain depends upon communication. And for the solving problems or creative or coming up something out of nothing, there's two main networks. One is called the attention control network, and that's up in the front, and that's your ability to focus, concentrate. And the other is called the default mode network. And the default mode network, it's a sort of a funny name, but the default mode network is the connections of many different parts of the brain, the front, the back, your past, memory of your past, what you're going to do in the future, where you are today. Two aspects to the creative process. The default mode network was So attention control center, when you've ever concentrated for a long time or studied hard or worked hard and tried to figure stuff out, it's exhausting. The brain is 2% of the weight of the body, and it burns up 20% of all the oxygen, all the energy, particularly this part of the brain, the front of it, when you're really working hard, concentrating. So scientists wanted to know, well, what happens to the brain when it's not active, when it's just resting, it's not doing anything, it's just quiet, when it's silent? What happens to the brain then? Well, it turns out the brain is never silent. The brain is never not active. But there is a time when the brain is not focused. It's just like idling, just humming, purring. And they called that the default mode network. So what does the brain default to? This default mode network. And the researchers were very dismissive of the default mode network. They said that's just daydreaming, that's mind wandering, that's rumination, worrying about just nothing productive is coming out of it. Well, Ron, they have two new names now for the default mode network. One is called the imagination network, and the other is called the genius lounge.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, the genius lounge. And the default mode network is when you're not concentrating and focused, when you're just like, you can't figure something out and you're taking a hot shower and the solution comes, or you're going for a walk and you go, oh my God, that's what I should do. It's the non-linear, intuitive, abstract, David Lynch calls it the big fish at the depth of the ocean, that these thoughts, these kinds of creative ideas can bubble to the surface. And the creative process is getting the good idea and then making it happen. Concentrate, attention. So you have the good idea, and so the good idea comes up, and then something shuts that default mode network down. Now I'm concentrating. And I concentrate.
Is that a question of sort of the individuality getting out of the way? Deeper levels of consciousness?
Yes. Well, here's the interesting thing. Stress blocks both. When a person's stressed, they can't concentrate, they can't focus, they're just distracted all over the place. And stress blocks creativity. The idea of writer's block. I can't come up with anything. I'm under so much pressure, I can't come up with everything. So stress shuts them down. One more thing, then I'll tie it to TM. They did a study, and they picked arbitrarily 200 of the most creative, successful. They had mathematicians, they had architects, they had musical conductors, they had super successful entrepreneur tech types, and they wanted to see if the brain functioned the same for them as everybody else. Turned out it doesn't. It turns out that really successful creative people, for most of us, you have a good idea, and then that shuts down, and then I just focus and I concentrate. And then one doesn't inform the other. Well, for these people, there was a communication, ongoing communication. So I have a good idea, and then I'm writing the book, I'm writing the poem, writing the song, figuring a proposal for a deal. But this part, the default mode network can continue, the Genius Lounge can continue to inform it, to improve it, to elevate it. So it's a back and forth there that never happens with regular folk. So it's constantly improving and expanding and expanding. And to finish the story, that's what certain meditations do. Certain meditations wake up that ability to focus and concentrate, wake up the ability to settle the mind to that inner stillness, and individuality is out of the way, and you can become like a vessel or a channel for really creative ideas, and then allow those two networks to communicate with each other. Isn't that interesting?
Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Wonderful stuff. Last question for you,
Sure.
Bob.
Sure.
What do you see as the role of meditation and the development of consciousness in terms of the collective consciousness and the beneficial effects it may or may not have on global issues?
Here in New York City, sometimes I'll talk to people and I'll say, if there's 8 million people in New York, and I'll say, if like 80,000, is that 1% of 8 million? If 80,000 people meditated in this city, you'd have a significant reduction in tension, in stress and angst in society. And everybody goes, yeah, that makes sense. Now, that comment 20 years ago is, oh, you're out of your mind. But there's an intuitive sort of sense that we're connected somehow, that we're somehow connected, that we influence each other. And not just on a surface level of I'm less grumpy when I get on the bus or the subway, but this hypothesis that comes to us from throughout the ages, that at our basis, there's this field of consciousness, and we're all connected. The human beingness, the field of beingness that we're all part of. And that meditation, properly understood and practiced, can have, by bringing the attention to that field, and stir that field, and just create more calm. Just the benefits of meditation for the individual can spill over into the benefits of meditation for society. It's just an intuitive feeling that more and more people say it makes sense. There's research to show that it's happened. They're skeptical, but they're not cynical. They're not closing their mind off. And so I personally feel that meditation, a byproduct of you and me and all the people watching this and listening to this, byproduct of our growing enlightenment, our growing resilience, our growing happiness, that no human being is an island. We're all connected together. And if there's a certain threshold to be reached with enough people doing it, it will have a profound effect in the collective consciousness of the whole society. And then there's advanced techniques, meditation techniques, where you don't even need to have 1%, you use square root of 1%, and you could have for the whole world family around 10,000 people doing these advanced meditation techniques together. And there's data to show that that works. And being a science guy, as I've said, I think one of the most interesting comments is when the researchers submit these findings to journals. The response from these independent researchers are, yes, it's very clear that it reduced violence, societal indicators of stress. It's very clear that it reduced violence, crime, war deaths. But then they comment, but they say, but I have no idea how it works. Because it doesn't fit our standard paradigm of that we are connected together. But I mean, the field effects, electromagnetic radiation, I can pick this little device up and I can call my brother in Mongolia and he can pick up the phone. 200 years ago, people would have said that's just weird or not possible. But we know that there's a field that connects these devices together and we can communicate. Well, you just take one more step. Consciousness is a field, and meditation practices, properly understood and practiced, can enliven that field and create a peaceful, powerful influence of calm. So I think the side effect of all of people meditating will be a better world.
So both for the individual and for the world, meditation, spiritual pursuit, the development of consciousness is really the underlying principle. It's really watering the root of the tree to bring the nourishment to every single aspect of the tree. Bob, I could speak with you for hours, honestly. We could go on and on. There's so many questions I could ask. This has been wonderful, but I know we'll have to stop here. So again, I sincerely thank you for your generous time today and appearing on Simplest State. Thank you so much.
And Ron, thank you for hosting this program and the guests you have on this program. You're really shining a light, a torch for people who would never, you're curating interesting topics, you're screening interesting topics, interesting people, and giving reason for people to think and perhaps act if it resonates on them. So it's a real service you're providing. I'm happy to support you in whatever you're doing.
Thank you so much. Well, very kind. Thank you. We'll close there. And for those of you that are listening, I hope you enjoyed. If you haven't yet subscribed, and if you like our content, I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel.